Hey, today we're going to talk about the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5th most important aspect of the single plane address position. Hey, welcome to the channel today. One of the most important things that you can do if you're a single plane golfer is obviously get the starting position, which we call the address position, perfect. That's such an important part of not only starting the motion, but also it's an important aspect of getting to the most important moment of the swing, which is impact. But how does it all work? Why does the address position matter that much? And what are the most important aspects to it? Today I want to talk about 5 of the most important things you need to be looking for when you're looking at your single plane address. And I'm going to speak to you today from somewhat of a coaching perspective, in the sense of if I was coaching you, these would be the things I'll be looking for. Now, the first thing is, and I want you to understand this, and I discuss this a lot on this channel when I talk about the single plane swing, is that everybody who teaches golf wants to talk about how important the grip is. Of course, the way you place the hands on the golf club is very important. But however, it also, if you get it incorrectly positioned on the club, your hands, it can be the most devastating problem to your golf swing as well. Why is that? Because when you place the hands on the club first, you are subject, or you're going to be the result of your body position will come from where you place your hands. So if you don't do it correctly, then you got a problem. So I don't do hands on the club first. Let me explain. The first most important aspect of the single plane address position is the body position or tilt. In other words, you got to look at that from 2 perspectives. You have this tilt of the body, which is side bend, and you have forward bend. That tilting the body does a couple of things. Number one, notice when I tilt my body, look at my shoulder position. It changes the way my shoulders are positioned. Now, if my shoulders change their position, notice how this arm is now higher than this arm. So you'll notice that it also, orientation of the hands can now be affected based on body position. Let's back up a step before we get into single plane address, and let's look at impact. If you look at a great impact position, you're going to need a couple of things. You're going to need the proper tilt of the body, the proper rotation of the body, the proper orientation of the arm, back of the hand to the target. And if I have a club in my hand, you will notice that the club will line up with this arm. The club will line up with this arm. And notice the trail arm is actually in slightly a bent position. So impact is when the body has its bends, side bends, and I can get this alignment of this lead arm to line up and the back of the hand to the target. So notice when I went to that impact position, the body had tilt to it. This is what you can kind of speak to in a common sense fashion here, is say, why would I start standing just like this when I'm going to be in a tilted position at impact? Why not make it easier? So let's go through these positions that I'm looking for in the single plane address that are the most important. The first one is tilt. I want to make sure I have side bend of the body, and then alignment of the lead arm, which then forms this shoulder will be higher. So the first one is just getting the tilt of the body so I can get the shoulder in position, and then I'll bring my hands in. So the first thing is just tilt. Now, forward bend is a function of the club you're going to hit. So if I have a 7-iron in my hand, or if I had a wedge, or if I had a driver. So you're seeing that based on the length of the club, that's my forward bend issue. But this tilt is always going to be the same on a side bend perspective. I'll just do that with you for a second to show you side bend. This is a driver. And you're going to see the ball's more forward, my stance is wide, there's the side bend for the driver, and there's the side bend at impact. Now, I'll grab a wedge, and you'll see it's the same exact side bend, except my stance is more narrow, and the ball position is more back. So here's my impact position for a wedge. So same as the driver, that was wider. For a wedge, grab the 7-iron, and you'll see the same thing. Ball position, a little wider stance, and there's my 7-iron. So you're seeing that these are all the same exact side bend positions, a little different forward bend position based on the length of the club. All right, so there's the first thing, is just side bend. Now, the second most important aspect of the single plane address is, now that I have the side bend primary, I can have the arm positions secondary. So arm position now is orientation of this arm to the target, those hands to the target, because of my side bend and arm position. And look at this trail hand, it now comes up. So now the arm position becomes very important, because now that I have the proper side bends and forward bends, I now can orient my hands and my arms. And what you see happen here, and this is where it gets pretty interesting, is the club now lines up with the lead arm, and it'll also line up with the trail arm. So that's why we call it the single plane, because I'm planing the club with this trail arm. That's exactly the plane it's going to be at impact. So now arm position becomes the second most important aspect of the single plane address. So it's tilt of the body, then arm positions. Now the third thing is the grip. And this is where a lot of people will teach that first. And we can talk about that, because if I somehow taught you a hand position, let me go through what correct is first. So here's the correct hand position. Because of my arm orientation and the alignments, notice how this hand is oriented to the target and this hand is from underneath. And so now that's what's allowing me to get the club perfectly onto plane at impact. Notice how my hand orientation is a function of the tilt of my body and a function of arm position. So the third thing is the grip. But just consider this for a minute. If I was to put my hands on the club and I get it wrong, I'm not saying you will get it wrong, but you probably will, and then I put this down there and then I try to line my arms up, now I got a problem, because now I'm trying to figure out how to orient my arms and my body to fix a bad hand position. I see it happen all the time, by the way. Let's say I had this hand in a weak position, club face open. Let's say that's where let's say it's wrong. And I go down here, as I tilt, look at my face is open. Now I've got to rotate the hands, and now the club is below the arm. Now I got to make a rotation. It just gets to be a compounding problem. And here's the big problem, is that most of what that golf ball is going to do is relative to the face angle. So anytime you mess with your hand position, you're messing with the face angle. So my suggestion is you always get your tilt correct, get your arms correct, and then get your hands correctly placed on the club. And that produces the proper single plane alignment. Now, the third thing that I want to talk about, or fourth thing, because we got ideal tilt, that's number one, arm position 2, hand position 3. The fourth thing is just body position. You'll see I have my alignment and ball position trainer on the ground. This is telling me where the ball position needs to go. Now why, and here, let me just talk about a little bit of science here. Why do I have different stance widths and kind of appearing to be different ball positions? And it's very simple. This driver has very little loft. My driver has 8 degrees of loft. So to launch this golf ball correctly, it's on a tee. And you'll notice when I get my single plane address position, my stance is wide enough and it's placing the head far enough behind the ball so that when this club comes down, it starts making a slight upward motion and I can launch the golf ball out of tee. Makes a lot of sense. Well, what were the variables for that? Well, tee height, ball position, stance width. All right. Now, a 7-iron, for example, this club is not meant to be hit on an upward fashion. It's meant to be hit in a downward fashion, which means that I need lean in that shaft. So the hands have to be in front to hit it, where a driver, not as much. So the way I accomplish that is the stance is not as wide. And then look what happens now. When I go less width in the stance, notice how my head goes forward, so my hands can now be in front of the golf ball at impact. You see how I didn't change the swing at all? Nothing is changing in my swing mechanics except for stance width, and now that allows the hands to go forward. Let's grab a wedge. So now it's similar to the 7-iron. The ball position's the same. Actually, these are the same ball position as a 7-iron. But now watch this. So the stance is not as wide, and now the hands are slightly more in front. So you have 7-iron here, and then wedge here. So nothing's changing in my swing motion except look at my head position relative to the ball. See, with the driver, 7-iron, wedge. So my stance width needs to be adjusted correctly for the club. Now, we'll say this. If I want to hit a 7-iron higher, I just go a little wider. If I want to hit a 7-iron a little lower, I just go more narrow. Why is that? And I'm teaching you right now about how to hit different trajectories. Because if I want to hit a 7-iron high, I go to about a 5-iron width, and the club has more effective loft. If I want to hit it lower, watch this. Narrow the stance to a wedge, more shaft lean, less loft. More loft, less loft. So if I want to hit it high and low, I simply change my stance width. A very easy way to hit it high and low. All right, final thing about single plane address, the fifth thing that's most important is foot position, leg position, and how the lower body reacts. Now let's do this with a driver so you understand this, because we have to make a very powerful single plane motion. Well, you can't do that if you're not stable. So I got to build some stability in the feet. So what I recommend is that it's not about standing with your feet straight out. Notice how my feet are straight out. This is actually pretty unstable, and the body wants to move very laterally if the feet are straight out. And you'll see a lot of guys do this, and they have a lot of leg problems, a lot of knee issues, because they're rotating as their body wants to stay in a very lateral position. The best way to handle your feet is to turn the trail one slightly out and turn the lead one out quite a bit. And now you can be more rotational. See how I can stabilize this in a rotational fashion? So my recommendation is, once you get the first four elements of your single plane address, you now have a rotation in the lead foot and a slight rotation in the trail foot. So now when I'm going to hit this driver for you here, you're going to see that I'm able to rotate into a stable leg with the feet correctly on the ground. So it's about stability here. So I recommend you get your feet correct. So those are the 5 most important elements of your single plane address. Hey, if you're enjoying this content and you want to learn a lot more about the single plane swing, click the bell icon, give me a thumbs up. I'll put some content in the description if you want to learn more, and give me your contact information, and I'll teach you all about the single plane swing.